These days, the Docklands Light Railway is one of the great success stories of public transport. It's gone from a low-budget, compromised transit system to a key part of the London network and a significant factor in the regeneration of an economically deprived area. So here's a question for you. How come people don't just trash the stations? Smash them up, vandalise them, wreck them, do unto them as the barbarians did unto Rome? Good question. I'm constantly told by people living outside of London and certain, for want of a better word, news organisations that my fair city is basically a cross between District 9 and Megacity 1, and I'll get murdered 14 times the moment I step out of the door. This is more than somewhat exaggerated. I've lived in London for over 40 years and I've not been killed even once, and let me tell you, I can be very annoying. Nevertheless, crime and vandalism in particular were serious concerns when the DLR first opened. The ultimate purpose of the railway was to regenerate the economically slumped Docklands area. With the running down of the docks and their associated industries in the second half of the 20th century, unemployment was high. Unemployment brought poverty and boredom, which in turn brought crime. Was it not reasonable to assume that this crime would spill onto the new railway? That rather than raising the area up, the railway might be dragged down? That initial railway running between Tower Gateway, Island Gardens and Stratford was something of an experiment. It wasn't the first modern light rail system in the UK, that was the Tyne and Wear Metro. But the DLR differed from the Tyne and Wear Metro in an important way. It was driverless. The DLR had been built on a relatively low budget. The original hope had been to build an underground line into the Docklands, but as the 1970s went on, the money dried up. The DLR was a compromise. It was a light railway. Much of its infrastructure was reused from the many disused railway lines in the Docklands area, and staffing was to be absolutely bare minimum. Trains would be driverless and stations would be largely unstaffed, except where the line connected with other lines. Monitoring of stations would be done via CCTV. There were certainly sceptics towards this. When the Beckton extension was being debated in 1987, the Member of Parliament for Bethnal Green and Stepney, Peter Shaw, expressed his doubts. He said, and I quote, "We in the East End are very well behaved, but stations that are only lightly and indirectly supervised by video cameras may give rise to serious vandalism problems. And indeed, even worse problems. I am being extremely British and understating the problem. However, it is serious. Although the line has only recently been completed, it is almost a brand new line, I have the greatest anxieties and worries about what may happen in future." The Right Honourable ladies and gentlemen then go on to talk about EastEnders for a bit, before returning to the question of safety and security. I'm not kidding, this is all on Hansard. The DLR's response, according to the official handbook, was, "Any discussion of passenger, and for that matter general public safety, can only be reasonably conducted when emotion is left out of the picture. Today, people seem less safe than they really are." Which isn't that reassuring, but the handbook goes on to explain that there would be help points, alarms, and cameras. There would also be train captains, staff members to assist on each train. Still, there were no barriers at stations, and they would thus be open all night. There was plenty of scope for ne'er-do-wells to get up to mischief. So why don't they? Well, actually they do, but not all that often, and TfL and its predecessors have been pretty good about cleaning and fixing things up when such incidents occur. Stations have been designed with ease of maintenance in mind. The early stations were built with a modular design, so parts could be easily swapped out and moved around. Reinforced glass is used. The semicircular canopies that you see on the older parts of the network were designed to be self-cleaning, shaped to allow rain to wash dirt off, and security and safety monitoring systems have been upgraded through the years. But there's also a certain kind of psychology at work here. Let me introduce you to a concept known as broken windows theory. This was first described by sociologists James Q. Wilson and George L. Kelling in an article in the March 1982 issue of Atlantic Monthly. You can read the article for free online, but they describe an experiment by psychologist Philip Zimbardo that illustrates the point. Zimbardo left a car in Palo Alto, California, on a fairly respectable street. The car had no number plates and its bonnet was up. Initially, it was left alone. Then, Zimbardo went at it with a sledgehammer. Within a few hours, passers-by had joined in the destruction and the car had been turned upside down, utterly smashed. Zimbardo had tried something similar in the Bronx in an area with a high rate of theft and vandalism, and that car had been taken to pieces almost immediately. The theory goes thus. We're social animals. We rely on other people for our social cues. For instance, if you enter a room where everyone's whispering, you probably whisper yourself. Or if you're wearing formal clothes while everyone else is in fancy dress, you feel out of place. And so, argue Kelling and Wilson, it is with crime. If people see evidence of antisocial behaviour, such as, for example, buildings with broken windows, hey, that's the name of the theory, they believe that in this place antisocial behaviour is okay. This becomes a vicious circle. People either actively engage in such behaviour or they do nothing to combat it. People become apathetic or fearful, and there goes the neighbourhood. This is just as true of transport. You might have heard the phrase misery line used to describe the northern line of the London Underground. There were many reasons for this, but among them were poor maintenance standards and a high crime rate. Now these things were relative. The crime on the Northern Line was nothing compared to the rate of street crime, but nevertheless it put people off using the line. So there was less motivation to invest, so the line became more miserable. It wasn't until the line received investment, improved staffing, improved policing, and better maintenance that things started to look up. The solution Kelling and Wilson suggest is that the key to improving an area is to create mechanisms that enforce the idea of social control. Now the way I put that just then sounds quite sinister, but what it means is basically showing people that the rules are that we don't misbehave around here. This might involve improving policing and police relationships with local people. It might involve community projects. Or it might involve simply keeping things clean, tidy, and in good order. With a relatively small investment of effort, problems can be halted before they get out of control, so goes the theory at least. And that's basically the philosophy that keeps the DLR stations in good order. Tackle problems as soon as possible, and you'll have a lot fewer problems to deal with. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and perhaps subscribe for more if that's your jam. I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the applied philosophy to my social problems. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.